We'll stop the transcription. Okay, so thanks for joining us today. This is the last SNBI Culvert training of the year. And I will start by, we're going to go over some links on the website. So I just wanted to point out some more things that we've added, and we'll also be going over a lot of these in more detail later. So this is our website. We got this is the inventory tab we're looking at right now. And the first link at the top, this is your bridge reports. So Joel will be going over that later, just how to print off a SNBI Culvert report. We've also added some links to different maps. So there's the Enterprise MnDOT Mapping Application, or EMMA. And then to make edits to EMMA, there's the RACER, Roadway and Characteristics Editor Request. And then there's a little PowerPoint presentation on how to use both of those. Then if we scroll down, here's all our contact information. And here's where you log into SIMS. And right below that are the SNBI Culvert documents we have. So this first one is how to create SNBI forms and reports. And Joe will be going over that later today. The second one is the SNBI Culvert Field Manual, which we'll be talking about those new items. And the last one is the combined presentations from today. And we'll be updating these two later this week. And then we keep going down to the bottom. We got a couple links to different softwares. There's Bridge Data Hub, and there's Mobile Bridge Map, and then a presentation at the bottom on how to use both of those. Let's see. Then if we go up, there's the Safety Inspection tab. You click that, and we've added a new section at the bottom, the Bridge Safety Refresher Seminar Presentations. So this has, I think, from this year and maybe a couple from last year, presentations from the seminars back in February. So if you're looking for those, that's where they are. All right, so we'll start off with Pete's presentation today, and I'll pass it off to him.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. This is essentially just a repeat of the presentation that we did at the 2004 refresher seminars. If you were there, maybe you'll remember it, but it has been a long time, so a lot of you might not be getting out to do inspections here for a while, so it's a good to follow through and just kind of get a refresher on the refresher, so to speak. Anyway, here's a reminder of why we're asking you to do this this culvert form. It has to do with the implementation of the specifications for the National Bridge Inventory. As you know, we're going to begin performing our inspections using those new SNBI items next April. However, the Federal Highway is only giving us 3 years for all those items to be populated, all those new data items that in the new SNBI. And the problem we have is that we do have about 1,700 culverts that are 48-month inspection interval that are due for inspection this year, and those wouldn't have another inspection until 2028. And so that is why we want you to, you know, kind of go through and give us essentially.
Any sound.
No sound. Sound? Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I guess we're. Is anybody else having a?
We can hear you fine, Pete. I think
I can hear you fine, Pete.
All right. Okay. So anyway, again, if so, we are asking you to fill out these items, get these in the system, so we have all that data ready for 2028. And the way it works is that if
Can't get any sound.
I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, if you don't fill this out, essentially you'll be reverted back to a 24-month inspection interval for those, and then it'll be due for inspection in 2026. So you'll have to do it then. Back at the seminars, we did hand out these culvert rating guides, and so this presentation is essentially set up on those. If you don't have one, you can print those up on our website. Grant showed you where those are located. And if you do have one with you, you can follow through today and kind of run through all these items. So the way it works out is that I'll be covering kind of the first group here. That includes kind of these are what we call the roadside hardware items, and then some of the new SNBI condition items. And then after that, Grant Cooper will cover a number of measurement items. And then after that, we'll have Joe Rusella will cover some of these items in the inventory for span, material, and type, and features. The items here that are in bold are the ones that are kind of all new and blank that at a minimum we have to get filled in. A lot of these other ones are going to be more or less are going to be migrated, and we just want some verification of those. Now I'm going to start with the roadside hardware items. Those are started on pages 5 through 18. Many of you are familiar with our old items. That was MBI 36A through B, what we call the safety features. And as you rated those, you should be familiar with them, and probably even added some notes in to explain your rating for those items. In the new system, 2 of those will be eliminated. The guardrail and the guardrail termination items will be going on, and so the top 2 railings and transitions will be replaced by these new SNBI items. And you would think that it'd be easier, to rate 2 items instead of 4, but unfortunately, it's a little bit different coding system. This is the coding that we currently use for that old item 36. They're just 3 options: 0, 1, or N. However, in the new SNBI for these new items, they have a lot more options. They're going to have 27 coding options that they give us with a 4-digit code. So they want a lot more information about, not just whether or not it meets standards, but they want to know the specific crash test standard, MASH, NCRHP, AASHTO. And for MASH, they want the year of that standard, which we typically, at least for now, are using 2016. They also want to know the crash test level, which is TL1 through TL6, which is the size and speed of the vehicle that feature has been crash tested to. For example, for most guardrail is designed to TL3, and that essentially is about the same as either a 2,400-pound car traveling at 62 miles an hour, like a Toyota Corolla, or a standard like a F-150 pickup traveling at 62 miles an hour. What we did is, 27 coding options is a lot. It's very confusing, and the SNBI offered very little guidance as to what those, how to identify those and to do anything about them. So what we did is we spoke with our people here at MnDOT that put together this roadside hardware identification handbook. And through speaking with them, we decided to kind of narrow it down basically to 5 main coding options that we're going to use for culverts. And so, this should include, 99% of our culverts will, or at least the vast majority will just fall into these items that you see here. N will be not required. The M163 refers to the MASH standards. The 16 is for the 2016, and the 3 is for crash level TL3. The 3503 is for the previous standard, the NCRHP 350, which was started in 1993, and again for TL3. The other coding is for I, is this for any feature that's not crash tested or any guardrail older than 1993, and 0 is when there's a guardrail required but is not present. And here are just some examples. One of the first things we run across with culverts is if you're out there looking at a culvert and there's no guardrail or barrier present on that thing. The first thing you have to determine is using these tables whether or not guardrail should be required or not. And this is very similar to what we used previously in our manual for guardrail. It's not a lot different. The tables are just slightly different. They've updated those. They're based on what we got from the roadway design people. But essentially it's going to be based on that clear zone distance, the speed limit and the ADT. The one thing that if you don't have this documented, it'd be nice to have it, but well, to do this, you're going to need the distance between the edge of the travel lane and the culvert end that you see there. You see there, it's a pretty narrow one, so obviously it's one where it probably would require a guardrail or railing. Yeah, once you go through this process, and again, if that culvert end is beyond the clear zone, you can just rate both items, the RH01 and 02 as N. If not, you code them both as 0, meaning that thing. So pretty easy coding if there's no guardrail present on above a culvert. If a guardrail is present above a culvert, you need to pick, again, one of those other 3 codes that we talked about before, and that's going to depend upon the specific hardware that you have present at your bridge. The MASH standard, the newest one, type 31, is on page 9 of the manual. It's identified as going to have steel posts. It's a little bit taller than the older guardrail, 31 inches high. And probably the key identification for this is the splices and that plate beam are going to be at the midpoint between those guardrail posts. So if you have that, you'll code it as M163. The older guardrail, or the NCR 350, we call that a W beam in our old standards. It's a little bit lower. It can be steel or wood posts, and in that case, the splices are going to be right at the posts. So if you have a guardrail meeting that present, you'll code it as 3503. This will be a drop-down screen right in SIMS when you fill out this form. We also have some culverts out there that are going to have these 3 cable guardrails, what we call low tension cable barriers. There are some of those that will meet the old NCRHIP 350 standards, and those are on pages 11 and 12. The key thing to remember with these 3 cables is that for it to meet standards, it has to have a very specific anchorage detail at the end that includes a large concrete block in the ground, and it will have a steel post at the end, regardless if it has wood or steel posts on the remainder of the guardrail. And again, so it has to meet that standard. Now, if you have any sort of a guardrail that doesn't meet one of these 4, or if it's something installed prior to 93, you're just going to code that as I, which means not crash tested. So we'll probably have a few of those out there. There are a couple just kind of outlier situations that you should be aware of. The one to remind you of, one is related to culvert fill. You know, to meet the new MASH standards, those posts, those guardrail posts, have to be 40 inches into the ground. If there's some culverts, they're not going to have enough fill on top of that culvert. In some cases, they might have, let's say, cut those guardrail posts off, or you might actually see a detail like this where there's a kind of a bolted connection to the top of that box culvert. Either case, those are not crash tested, so those will be just coded as I if you know those conditions exist. The other outlier, this is one that we found when this is actually an example right from the SNBI manual. When I first saw this, I thought it odd that would be meeting any sort of standards. You see that big length of guardrail with no posts right above the culvert. But this is actually a new kind of what they call an omitted post design. It's a very specific design, and we actually have it right in our MnDOT standards. It's available for a couple different things, but up to a 22 and a half foot width wide culvert. It can use these. So if you do this one, we'll have to meet these kind of specific standards that you see there. There'll be like, I think, 3 wood posts on each side, and it's I think it's a doubled up plate beam across there. Could be, but anyway, that's explained there on we have a MnDOT standard for those. So if you do run across those, that does meet MASH standards. About 5% of our culverts that we have on our inventory are going to have some sort of an integral vehicular railing on them, like you see on these structures. In that case, you know, you should already be coding and rating a railing element for that structure. What we're going to do for these, it's a little bit different as far as coding them. You don't need to code these right away. We're going to migrate these based on what's called the MnDOT rail type code. That's going to be displayed at the bottom left corner of your structure inventory report. And in our system, if you look in, you know, like in what we have our chapter D, the BSIPM, our coding guide, we're going to have all these. We have all these diagrams for about 70 different rail types. You know, we hope that this coding is correct for all our bridges, but we know it's not always that way. So, you know, if you're out there inspecting it, you know, look at that, see if it is correct. You can look in the coding book. But we also, for this process, we just want you to, you know, take a photo of that railing, make sure that's right up in SIMS, you know, describe the railing that you have there as close as you can, and hopefully, you know, it is coded correctly. But we are going to migrate these automatically in 2025, so you don't have to code these right away. But what you can do right now is, if you do have one of these structures with that on, you can just use our temp code. That's a X that you can use for now until we do that initial migration. When you do have a culvert with that barrier on top, you do have to also rate the other item. This is the transition, the BRH02. The first step in that is to determine if approach guardrail transitions with transitions is required for that structure. And again, that's going to be based upon speed and ADT, things like that. And this is the criteria here for the trunk highway bridges. And that's going to be on page 6. And then also on there, there's going to be, this is the criteria for our local roads. Again, just based on ADT and that, whether or not it's required. And so if approach guardrail is required and is not required and not present, you code it as N. If it's required and not present, you code it as 0. Now, if you do have a structure, we actually do have a culvert structure where you do have a approach guardrail transition like this. We do have to code that according to the manual, and that's in pages 15 through 17. We have all the different types of guardrail. We'll be doing this soon for bridges as well. But anyway, for our guardrail transitions, there are several different types, starting with the MASH. That's the type 31. That's on page 15 that you see here. That has what we call a thry beam instead of the old W beam on that transition area. It's going to have a 5-bolt connection to the end, and it will have steel posts on those the MASH ones. Our older, what we call the W beam that meets the NCHRP 350. Those could either have a wood post or a steel post, and those the guidelines for those are on 16 and 17. And this will be very similar to what you've been coding over the years, but for these, it usually extends about, you know, again, 20 to 25 feet back from the bridge. Those will have a 4-bolt connection, and for this item, if it's installed in 1993 or later and meets those standards, you'll code those as 3503. And then if you have any sort of you know, there are a lot of things that can be messed up with the transitions. This one doesn't have like a rub rail below it. There are a lot of items. So if there's anything that doesn't, you know, that means that transition doesn't meet one of the standards, or if it's installed prior to 93, we just code those as I, not crash tested. I'm going to move on to a couple of the new condition items that we'll be rating here for structures. Again, we'll be rating for all bridges starting in 2025, but just for these culverts, we want you to the ones you're looking at this year that are in the 4-year cycle, we want you to rate a couple of these new SNBI condition items. One of those is railing condition item. It does have to be rated for all culvert structures. This one doesn't impact your inspection interval, so if it does get knocked down to say a 4 or 3 or 5, it's not going to mess up your inspection cycle and frequencies. When you do for bridges with integral railings like this, you obviously have already been rating that as a railing element, so you should have some existing notes to base this rating on. And so finally, just kind of review your railing element notes when you rate that item. For culverts with a guardrail that run continually across like this, you also have to rate the railing item. However, that's only going to refer to that section of guardrail directly above the culvert. And in this case, you could probably review your notes for the guardrail element if there happens to be some damage right directly above the culvert structure. And if there's no vehicular railing, barrier, guardrail present, you code that as an N. And in this case here, if you just have like this ornamental railing just on the head wall, again, that's not a vehicular railing. So in this case, you might rate that under a railing element, just if there are issues with it. But for this item, you just code it as N. The other item that we have to rate for condition is the railing transitions. Just like we coded the adequacy of those transitions, we have to rate the condition of those for all these culvert structures. Again, it's just that we're going to use those same rating tables that we've been using for MBI ratings over the years. For culverts, when you do have a vehicular railing on there, you're going to kind of look at that approach guardrail extending about 20 feet out from the bridge, 20 to 25 feet, depending on how obvious that transition is. That's going to include all the hardware of that transition and everything else, and the connection to the bridge. For culverts, we just have this continuous guardrail over it. You're just looking at those sections immediately adjacent to the culvert at each corner. And you don't have to, this doesn't go like 400 yards away from the culvert. They're just really looking at that section that would constitute, say, a transition. There isn't really a true transition on these, so you just kind of go at least about 3 posts back from the culvert. So you're just looking for any damage in that location. And where you don't have any sort of approach guardrail present or a transition present, you'll just code that as N. And a couple more condition items I want to do. As you know, for culverts, for a long time, we've just been rating like the channel as one item. It's now going to be split into 3 different elements. The new channel item is going to migrate directly from your old channel one, but now we separate out the channel protection as well as the scour element. So this channel protection element is going to be blank. It's going to have to be rated. Just a reminder with this one, it has to be rated 6 or higher to qualify for a 48-month cycle. So if you do happen to rate this down, it will revert to a 24-month. This is going to, you're looking at here, for typical, like say a pipe culvert, you're looking at that riprap or other slope protection or channel protection you have around the entrance, around the head walls and the wing walls. On these precast ones, like in the top photo, we have had some instances of that riprap washing out and like that whole roadway failing because of the washing out between those barrels. For a arch culvert or other culverts like that, you're going to look at that riprap going up the wing walls and in front of the footing around that that whole condition of the banks or in the stream around that structure. And because it's a culvert structure, you do have to rate this. It is kind of a weird thing they have with the SNBI item. They do say if channel protection is not needed, has never existed, you can rate that as an N. That will get a little confusing on some culverts like this one, where like, well, was there ever that depending on how you rate that one, it could mess it up. But I would hope that you'd assume that there's maybe some sort of channel protection there that has now washed away. And then the final item I want to talk about is a scour condition. That's on page 22. Again, this is an item that's going to be blank and must be rated. We do have a scour defect element now, but we have not been rating that for culverts. So unless you have notes on scour in your channel item, you're not going to really have any existing notes to base this on. It's just going to be a 0 through 9 rating scale, but this is a very important one. It will impact your 24-month and your 48-month inspection intervals. If it gets lowered, it's really focused on that scour just adjacent to the culvert itself. And here are just a couple examples. On this one, we have this is a pipe steel arch culvert with that's a 2 barrel. So this is the kind of the pier, I guess, or the footing between the 2 barrels. In this case, you do have a localized scour hole here right at the end of that. However, if you look at that footing that is intended to be exposed, there's actually a protection angle on the end of it. So it's not like we're getting a lot of serious scour. You're not getting any undermining. So in this case, no intentional footing exposure. So this would be a condition 6. In this case, we're seeing a little bit more extensive scour at the end here. We got that footing that's the wing wall that's exposed. It's not undermined yet, so we're not really affecting the stability of the structure yet. So that would be maybe an example of condition 5 for that rating. And again, we have to rate this for all culvert structures, even if there's not any water flowing through them at the moment. You know, if there's, you code it as 9 if it's dry and there's no evidence of scour. So anyway, that is all I have for my run. Now we're going to move on, and Grant Cooper is going to cover some of the new measurement items.
All right, thanks, Pete. All right, we'll get started here. So we're going over the measurement items. There's 3 items. We don't have any data available to migrate, and so we need the inspector to record new data. First item is maximum bridge height. So this new item will need to be field measured or estimated if it's not practical. And for culverts, this is the distance from the top of the culvert to the normal water level or floor of the culvert if it's dry. You round the nearest tenth of a foot. And once you put in a number in this item, you don't need to update it. And you can if you want, but it's not required. And if you've already recorded past measurements, we suggest you use the average. Here's a couple of more examples. And we will start using this item once we have the complete data. We're hoping to use it as part of extreme flood vulnerability analysis project. And that project is trying to look at all culverts and bridges to figure out if they are the correct size based on projected future conditions, just to see if that culvert or bridge should be replaced sooner. As you know, if there's already a road project going through, maybe we can get that culvert replaced sooner than later, and maybe make it bigger if future projections show that might be required. The next item is minimum span length. It's another new item. This is the length of the smallest culvert barrel, and you can base this measurement on the plan or field measure it. If you have a single barrel culvert, then it's going to be the same as the max span. Remember to use the skew. So for example, if you have a 10-foot barrel with a 30-degree skew, you do 10 divided by the cosine of 30, and you'd have 11.5 for the minimum span length. The last item is inspection equipment. So this is for recording both access and inspection equipment that's used during that bridge inspection. It's a multi-select item, so you can select as many options as you need. For culverts, probably most of these things won't be used, but there are like waders or a boat. So you can select as many items as you need, and this will be required for bridges coming up soon. One change from previous guidance is that if you don't use any of this equipment, you can just leave it blank. And we might split this into 2 dropdowns in SIMS, one for access and one for inspection equipment, but that might be in the future. So for now, it's all one item and it's a multi-select. So for these next items, we have existing data that we're able to migrate, and we're just asking you to verify and update it if needed. The first is the NBIS bridge length. So with the FHWA's new guidance, they say that the length of all structures under 30 feet must be field measured. Now the NBIS bridge definition is a total length of more than 20 feet, while the Minnesota bridge definition is 10 feet or more. So there's a little difference there. Again, remember to use the skew, and for culverts, you want to include everything from including the inside walls and the fill between barrels. So don't include the outer walls of the outer walls of the outer barrels. So you'll see that measurement A for both of these examples. And then that bottom example, that pipe to the right, the distance is greater than half of the diameter of the smaller pipe, and so it's not included as part of that bridge structure. So again, just make sure to measure from the inside of the outside wall to inside of the other outside wall, including everything in between. Remember to use the skew. In this example, the NBIS bridge length is 21 feet. You have two 8-foot wide boxes, 6 inches of fill in between them. The two inner walls are both 8 inches. You add all that together, you get 17.8, and then divide that by the cosine of the 32-degree skew, and that's how you get 21 feet. And again, this is another example where the third barrel is far enough away that's not part of the bridge structure because the distance is greater than half the diameter of that smaller barrel. Next is maximum span length. Again, it's an existing item, but it may change depending on the field measurement recorded for the NBIS bridge length. For single barrel culverts, your minimum span, your max span, and your NBIS bridge length will all be the same. Remember to use the skew. So in this case, you have a 16-foot wide culvert, 30-degree skew, and your answer for maximum span length is 18.4. This is bridge width curb to curb. So this is the sum of the most restrictive road widths for all roadways carried by the culvert. For most culverts, this will be the same as the approach roadway width. And again, we have existing data that we've migrated. So we previously for culverts, we record this item as 0.0, but we migrated the roadway data we had to put into this field. Now there is a slight change from what we've said previously, and we're just the guidance from the FHWA was a little unclear, and so we've modified it a bit to fit with what we've done previously here in Minnesota. And so when you're measuring the bridge width curb to curb, that top example is a little different. We're saying you should measure from the curb to curb and include everything. So if there's a painted on median, you just have the one measurement A. But then if you look at that second example, we're saying any type of raised median or barrier to not include that as part of your bridge width curb to curb. So you would add A plus B in that second example, and that would be your width curb to curb. So if there's any type of raised median, don't include it, whether it's mountable or not. And then that same with that bottom example, where there's a grass ditch going between the two, you just include the sum of A plus B for the two roadways carried by the culvert. Here's just some more examples where you know, the one on the left, there is a curb, so it's pretty obvious, but the one on the right, there isn't a curb. So you just measure from the outside of shoulder to outside of shoulder. This is two items, the left and right curb or sidewalk width. Again, this is verifying existing data, but we didn't always record sidewalks on culverts before, and so now it is required. You record only the sidewalk, not the boulevard. So you can see Rodney's measuring the sidewalk, and we're not including any of that grass area as part of that sidewalk. But if there isn't a sidewalk on the culvert, but there is a curb, then you record the curb width. And then if there is a railing, you do not record the railing width, only curbs that project out from the front face of the railing. So if there's a sidewalk on the culvert, this item is simple. You just record the sidewalk width. If there's no sidewalk, just record the curb width. And if there's a railing, only record the curb width that projects out from the front face of that bridge railing. Here's an example of that. So you can see this, there's guardrail and a curb on this culvert. The guardrail is now considered a bridge railing. And so you can see that the curb projects out about a foot from that bridge railing. So we report 1 foot. For the approach roadway width, this is again verifying what we have in SIMS. It's the sum of the most restrictive road widths for all roadways carried on the structure. So if you had a culvert that carried both a main line and a ramp, you'd add those together. Or if it's a divided roadway, you'd add all segments of road carried on the culvert. For most culverts, it'll be the same as the bridge width curb to curb. And again, we're tweaking what is in the SNBI just to fit with what we've done previously with our past practices in Minnesota. And we're saying don't include any type of raised median in the approach roadway width. The next is bridge median type. So there's 4 types over on the right. There's no median, open median, closed median mountable, and closed median non-mountable. Our definition of what is mountable has changed. Previously, a 6-inch curb was considered non-mountable, but now a curb must be greater than 6 inches to be non-mountable. So I think a lot of our medians will switch from non-mountable to mountable. Here's an example of a open median. This is a single culvert barrel with no top in the median. Not very common, but it does exist. Here's a closed median with a mountable curb. It's only 6 inches. This is also a mountable median. So there's a ditch going over the culvert. There's no curb, and we're saying ignore if there's a cable barrier going through that ditch. Ignore that and call it mountable. Then I couldn't actually find an example of a non-mountable, a good one. I think many of our current non-mountable medians should be changed to mountable because of that 6-inch rule. So now it has to be greater than 6 inches to be considered non-mountable. And the last, this is a MnDOT item. It's an existing item, but we didn't always have data recorded for this. So this is just the minimum median width on the culvert and recorded to 1/10 of a foot. All right, I will pass it off to Joe, and he will go over the next section on features.
Okay, hello everyone. So I'm going to go over 2 sections, span material and type, and features. These 2 sections will be populated for all our structures based on our current inventory. And so we're asking that you verify the accuracy of the data. And for features, we're asking that you add anything that may have been missed or that's not accounted for currently in our inventory. The first section, span material and type. This is generally what it's going to look like on the culvert form in SIMS. So there's really only 3 fields that will be, or 3 or 4 fields that will be required to verify. So these top 2 fields, as I said, it's going to be pre-populated, but once the top field is selected, that second field is going to auto-populate. So you won't have to fill out anything there. And there's going to be multiple span sets if the material or design of the culverts are different. In this case, there's only 1 span set. So there's only 1 section here. One thing to note for culvert structures, you will see all of these options for span type selection, but for culvert structures, only C and V should be selected. Span material, these are all the options that we would expect to see for culvert structures. Again, you'll see the entire list. When we migrated in steel pipe culverts or pipe arches, we assumed they were bolted, steel bolted shapes. So you'll see SO3. But if that is different in reality, then we're asking you to correct that on the SIMS form. Same with timber structures. We assumed nail laminated just for migration's sake. Again, correct that if needed. Span type. Again, you'll see the full list. These are just some examples. So arch under fill without spandrel. You see a lot of fill, and then the roadway or pathway above the culvert. Closed spandrel, the roadway or pathway is directly on top of the arch. Three-sided frame, those are identified by the vertical walls. Most of the time they have the arched top, and they'll sit on a footing on either side. And your four-sided frames would be your standard box culverts. Flexible pipes are your aluminum or steel pipe structures, and rigid would be your masonry or concrete type pipe structures. Some examples. So both of these structures will just have one span set. The number of spans does not indicate multiple span sets as long as it's the same material and design. So that this one on the left has 4 spans, but they're all the same material and design. So we'll account for them in one span set. The one on the right, the arch on the right, is just one span. So just one design and material. This is generally what it would look like in the form. Another example, this one has 4 spans and 2 span sets. So there's going to be a span set for the rigid pipe arch on either side, and then a span set for the 4-sided frame. This is what it would look like in your form. This may not be migrated in this way. So if you do have structures like this, you may need to add a span set, most likely for the rigid pipes. When to use V, culvert extension. It's only when the culvert is extended with a different material or design. Some examples of this. This structure was originally a reinforced concrete box culvert, which was extended with a steel pipe culvert. So the original structure would always be this C culvert, and then whatever was added later would be the V culvert extension. You would not need to add the culvert extension if it was extended with another reinforced 4-sided frame. You only need it because it's a different design and material here. Another example that might be a little tougher to see. So the original construction was a reinforced concrete box. Later, precast box was added to the structure along the barrel length. And so we would still add the culvert extension here because it is a different design. So the next section is features. Again, this will be pre-populated based on our current inventory. Very similar to the span sets. If you do add a new feature, you will just need to select that top field, and then the second one will auto-populate. We really want to just have these numbered based on the highways carried on the structure, followed by the highways and features carried below the structure. So the main feature carried on should always be listed as this HO1. A simple example, I think this will be pretty common. This structure here would have 2 features only. It has an undivided roadway and then a waterway feature passing through. So we have a highway feature and a waterway feature. If this roadway was divided, we would have two highway features, and we'll get to an example with that. So this structure currently is going to have inventory just this Highway 52 and the waterway. We'll be completely missing that Township Road 490th Street. So we'll need to add it. So I'm going to walk through just all the fields, generally what it would look like for each feature. So we have a highway feature, another highway feature, and then a waterway feature. And you can see how the first highway feature is HO1, followed by HO2 and HO3. And again, those are auto-calculated. I chose to do HO1 and HO2 as US 52 because that's the highest ranking highway versus the township road. Waterway feature. Feature location. So in the drop down, you'll see several options. Most of the time carried on bridge and below bridge are going to be used. This situation, all our highway features are carried on the structure with our waterway below the structure. And then feature name. This is migrated in based on the roadway name field that we currently inventory. So in that case, since we are splitting up US 52 into two different features, you'll see that it is migrated as US 52 for both. So it would be good to add directional information there to identify which is which. Lanes on highway. So since we're breaking this up into two different features, we'll count the lanes per side and per highway feature. Turn lanes and merge lanes that run the full length of a structure will be counted as a lane. So in this case, this HO1 will have 4. You can't see it here, but if you zoomed out, you'll see that those are actually turn lanes. And then HO2 would just have your 2 mainline lanes. For unmarked roads, like this dirt road up here, if it's greater than 16 feet wide, it'll be counted as 2 lanes. If it's less, it would just be 1 lane. So in this case, this is a 2-lane unmarked roadway. And for non-highway features, we'll leave this field blank. Maximum usable roadway surface. This is very similar to bridge width curb to curb. The sum of all your highway records should be the same as your bridge width curb to curb. So since we're tracking all these highway features separately, it'll allow us to know what highway feature is what width. Instead of with the bridge width curb to curb, it's all combined. It's a little more specific. So in this case, they're both 36 feet outside of shoulders, outside of shoulder. If there was a curb or barrier there, you would go to that. And then this diagram here is on page 46. So we're excluding the grass median and just collecting the edge of shoulder to edge of shoulder measurement. This is what the final entry would look like for features for the structure on your culvert form, with the corrected feature name, corrected lanes, and added highway maximum usable surface width. This one is a little more complex. There are a lot of features, and currently we'll only inventory some of them. So the migrated data won't be totally accurate. So this structure, we would migrate in a highway, a railroad, and then a waterway underneath. But we'll be missing the pathway features and the parking lot entrance there, which the FHWA stated that should be called an urban feature. So these are the added features that we'd add to this structure. You'll notice the lanes on highway and highway maximum usable surface width are blank for all of these because they are not highway features. The reason that we added 2 pathway features to this was based on a response from the FHWA, and they stated since the loose line trail and the city sidewalk are drastically different, they wanted 2 different pathway features. If it was just a sidewalk on each side, then 1 pathway feature would suffice. It's kind of nice to keep those separate since that's a state trail versus just a city sidewalk. Okay. I'll walk through some examples here. First off, if you don't know where our inventory page is, you can just Google bridges and structures. And it should be this first option here, bridges and structures, and then our inventory page. Just click on that tab up top. A lot of what I'm about to go over is going to be in this document here, described. It's just a PowerPoint document that Grant pointed out earlier, kind of step by step if you need that for reference. But I'm going to walk through some some options for you to print inventory report or the Culvert forms, and then use the Culvert form in SIMS. So first, I'll go to the bridge reports page, which is this first link here, and bridge inspection reports. And we have this new report, Culvert Data Collection SNBI. So here you can either type in one bridge or a list of bridges separated by a comma. You could select your agency and then select another filter here. So if I do that as an example, choose Lac Parle, and we have some options here. Due by next February 15th. This is going to give you every culvert, no matter the frequency. So you could have 24 or 48 month in here. These are just due by February 15th, 2025. You have all these other more finite examples. And then this last option, this is just going to give you culverts on a 48-month frequency that are due this inspection season. And we added this because this form is only required this year for 48-month culverts. So if you wanted to limit what's required to fill this form out. So if I run this, so this is always going to print 2 pages per structure. It's just the amount of information on it was a lot to put onto 1 page. So you'll see that 34 pages are here, so 2 per structure. Up at the top, you have, if there was data in SIMS, these would be populated similar to this. These narratives are changing a little bit. That'll be changed most likely later today. Our web team is working to update this form. And then if you go to the next page, you'll see your span material and type section, and then followed by your features. So if a structure has, 4, 5, 6 features on it, it could spill onto a third page as well. I think most of the time for culvert structures, there'll be 2 or 3 features most likely. But again, this is just bringing up 48-month culverts on that filter. If you wanted to just look up one structure, just type it in there, click view report. And this is just the one structure. This one happens to be on 24 months, so it wouldn't have been in that list for this agency. So this would be a great way to print all of your culvert forms in bulk versus going into SIMS and doing it one by one. So next I'll go to SIMS here. This is our demo site because I'm going to show you inside the form. Logged in as Grant currently. So this was one of our examples in my PowerPoint. This is the one where we had US 52, which was divided, and then a waterway feature, and then a township road also on top. So when you're at the structure, you just go and create a normal routine or update report. You'll have this available on both of those forms. So I'll just create a routine here. And so normally when you open a report, it'll bring you to the SIA edit form where you would normally do your reporting. We have this section culverts on 48-month frequency form here, SNBI culvert and SIA edit. This is a combination of this form just with the added culvert items. So you don't have to do both. It'll all be here if you're doing a culvert and you're collecting this data. At this top here, these are the items that Pete was talking about, your railings. You have all of these options. I believe we covered most of them. We added a few in here just per agency request that came across situations. And each one of these has a notes field as well. Your transitions, your railing condition ratings, and these are just a 0 to 9 or an N. Channel protection and scour condition ratings. Again, there's notes for each of those. And then we started on field measurements and equipment. And then inspection equipment, this is that multi-select option. So you can leave this blank or you can select AN and IN. So if I selected something, so you just go through and you can click and you can see they'll all show up. And if I want to get rid of one, I just go back into the drop down and click it and they'll all disappear. On the production site, this narrative has changed. We say that you can just leave it blank. You do not have to select IN and AN. Then moving down, it's a field verification section. So these will all be populated based on our current inventory. We're just asking that you verify the information here. If we keep going down, we'll run into the span material and type section. So this is where you would, for culvert structures, you would only select the C or V, but you will see all these other options. So just be conscious of what type of structure you're doing. And then features. here at the bottom. So this way, this is the way this structure migrated in. We had US 52 inventoried, and we knew it was divided. So we broke it up into 2 features, and then we knew it crossed over a waterway, so that migrated as well. So this is how initially the structure would show up. There are a few things that are off about this because we're taking one existing field and breaking it into 2. So things like the feature name, as I mentioned. So I think HO1 was northbound, and feature 2 was southbound. And HO1 had 4 lanes, and HO2 had 2, so that was good. And then I think we said that the southbound 52 was also 36 feet. And if we want more of a descriptive name for this waterway, I think it was like Pine Island Creek. If you want to, you could just leave it as creek, but. And then we're just missing the township road. So in order to add a feature, use this button up here, and this will function the same for this span set. If you needed to add a span set, you just use this add button. So I'm going to add a new feature. It gets a little cut off. I'll get rid of this here. It's a little cut off. So we're adding a highway feature. Drop down, select highway. You'll see this auto calculate to HO3. I did not click anything. It just did that. And it was carried on the structure. And it was for 90th Street. And it was a unmarked dirt road that was over 16 feet. So that was 2 lanes. And I believe we measured it at 24 feet wide. So this is fine for data entry. If you wanted to see the highway feature, everything carried on the bridge below, you can use these arrows above each feature. So I'm just going to move this highway feature to the left. Nothing changed except for the placement. So if you're looking at the form, it makes it a little easier to see what's actually carried on and then followed by everything below. Then after you're done filling out all your culvert information, you can just continue on to your normal inspection, appraisal, and MnDOT condition ratings. So this is what is on the SIA edit form currently. So this is why you don't have to fill out both if you're collecting the culvert data. And there is another, there's a new print form for this stuff as well. So if you want to print the report, this is how every structure will appear when you go to the print report page. You'll have your normal stuff, and then we did add a few maintenance forms, which you can leave unchecked unless you're actually using those. But here at the bottom, you'll see it's SNBI Culvert Section 1 and SNBI Culvert Section 2. Just the way the program worked, we had to split them up into 2 different forms. But you can just check these boxes on. I'm going to uncheck these since we don't need them at the moment. And then we can view this PDF. So if you wanted just one inventory report, you could use SIMS, or you could go to the bridge reports page as I showed you before. It'll be very similar. Appearance might be just a little bit different. If it will load. There we go. So very similar. Just programs used to design it are different. So again, you have all your railings measurements, your verification section, span set, and then features. All be listed here. One thing to note when you do go to change the workflow stage after the team leader's done, it might be nice to add a comment in here for your program administrator saying which form you filled out, if you filled out the Culvert form, so they can review that data as well. All right, I think that's all I had for you. Sure. Grant brought up showing how you could print a report after it was approved. So I'm just gonna go back in here. You always need an inspection date. And we'll just go ahead and approve it. So it'll be very similar to the print report page. Refresh here. So now this is the report that I just approved. If I wanted to print those Culvert forms or really anything, click on these three bars here on the right next to the report that I want, view report. And because I had these checked within the report, they're already going to be checked here. So if I had anything else checked, it would remain checked. But you can still click these on and off as you want. But then you would just view a report and it would download another copy. Yep. Okay. Are there any questions that came up? I guess we'll stop recording now if you